think positivity has a time, a place, a purpose. I just think we've become so obsessed with it to a degree that it's starting to hurt us more than help us.
Hello, and welcome to the Psychology Podcast. Today we welcome Whitney Goodman to the show. Whitney is the radically honest psychotherapist behind the hugely popular Instagram account Sit With Wit. She's the owner of the Collaborative Counseling Center, a private therapy practice in Miami. Whitney has her own column in Psychology Today and has been featured in the New York Times, Teen Vogue, New York Magazine, InStyle, Good Morning America, and other publications. Her most recent book is called Toxic Positivity, Keeping It Real in a World Obsessed with Being Happy. In this episode, I talked to Whitney Goodman about toxic positivity. A happy outlook in life is a strength, but when taken too far, it can backfire and work against us. Positivity stops becoming helpful when we deny the realities of hardship and trauma. Whitney believes positivity is not the panacea to our problems, and that it needs to be applied at the right time and with the right purpose. She shares with us ways on how to be supportive without being dismissive of our own well-being and the well-being of others. We also touch on the topics of authenticity, gratitude, hope, relationships, and work. It was really fun chatting with Whitney, and I really appreciated her authentic style, and we laughed a lot in this episode as well. So without further ado, I now bring you Whitney Goodman. I'm really excited to chat with you today about toxic positivity.
Me as well.
So I guess no pressure to smile.
Yes.
Come as you are.
Thank
Come as you
you.
are. Yeah, I just want to dive right in. You know, you're a therapist and you're also an Instagram superstar.
Thank you.
How did that come about? How did both come about? Why did you go into therapy, and then why did you join Instagram?
I always wanted to work with people. I was definitely that friend that, was like, oh, I thought I had all the answers to everything. So I ended up becoming a therapist and quickly learning that that was not what therapists do. Was tell people what to do. But it's the only job I've ever had, and I love it. So I got on Instagram really just to market my private practice. I did not expect it to become this big part of my life. And a lot of people told me I was crazy for trying to market my practice on there. And now it seems to be like where every therapist is these days.
Yeah, it's like the battle of the therapist who has more likes on Instagram.
It's bizarre. It really is.
I still can't get my blue check no matter what I do.
Well,
Like why? What's up with that?
I got my blue check through
Yeah.
like some campaign I did with Nextdoor. They were like, "Oh, we can get it for you right now." I'm like, "What? You have to know a guy, I guess."
Yeah.
Instagram.
That's the thing is I don't know a
I
guy.
know, and I don't know who the guy is. Other people have asked me. I'm like,
Yeah.
if I knew, I would tell you.
Yeah, exactly. That'd be like knowing the secret to the
Right?
universe. Yeah. Okay, so I loved your new book on toxic positivity. As you state, positivity isn't toxic, it becomes toxic. I think that's a good starting point here because you're not saying that every attempt to be positive is something that should be considered toxic, right?
Absolutely. So it really depends on the timing, the audience, and the topic, right? What might be positive or fine in certain situations can become toxic when we use it incorrectly.
Okay, and you distinguish between helpful positivity and toxic positivity. So maybe that would be that'd be useful to actually like tell me what falls in one category and what falls in the other category. Give me some examples if possible.
Sure. So I think with helpful positivity, we're making space for the good, the bad, and the neutral, right? So we're saying things like, today really sucked, and I think tomorrow is going to be better, or I love this meal that I'm going to have at the end of the day. Toxic positivity is more like everything has to be good. And if we express any negativity or complaints, we're attracting more negativity, or we're somehow a negative or a bad person. And we have to deny that any of that even exists.
Yeah, the denying or the pretending. You know, a lot of people I feel like are pretending these days to be happy all the time. There's almost like a social pressure even when people ask, "How are you?" Right? Like if I tell them the truth, they don't really want to hear that.
I
They don't want to
100%
hear
agree. I feel like social media plays such a big role in that we all sort of are like
that.
avatars of our own self, these days. And
Mm,
there's this feeling of like, how do I want to perform my existence, right? And how do I want people to see
yeah.
me? And people feel like they're a burden or they're going to get abandoned if they don't have all these positive feelings.
Well, you've shown that not to be the case, right? I mean, you keep it real on your social media, and people really resonate with it. I guess maybe you're saying things that people wish want to be saying
Yeah,
themselves.
I try to. I think I'm definitely coming from this place of like I'm a therapist, so it's normal for me to talk about these things to some extent that people aren't
Yeah.
as judgmental, but I hope to like model that yeah, we don't have to talk about everything on social media, but we can show something.
Yeah. Yeah. It just personally in your own life, did it bother you for many years that there was kind of this pressure to be positive? Like, is there something in your personality? What is the individual differences variable here as well? Those who they're because there's going to be some who listening to this podcast who they are toxic positivity incarnate, but they're not going to like this conversation.
Yeah.
They're going to be like, "Oh, I'm oppressed.
Right,
I'm being
right.
oppressed." Do you know what I'm saying?
For sure,
So
for
yeah.
sure. I think for me, I always noticed that there was like this performance aspect. Like I was supposed to just act like everything was fine, even when it wasn't. Or when I started working as a therapist, like sort of noticing the things people talk about behind closed doors and then
Mm.
what people are showing on social media. I even saw that with my own friends that I'm like, gosh, it's so aggravating that we feel this pressure to show up in a way that we're not. And it's something that I don't like to do. It bothers me to not be at least somewhat authentic.
Yeah, yeah. So when did you coin the term toxic positivity?
I am very cautious about saying that. I've never seen it used anywhere before I said it on that Instagram post, but I don't know. It could be floating out there somewhere.
Yeah, because I know like also like yeah, like Susan David uses that term a lot as well,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Well, she wrote the book Emotional Agility prior to that, which I know toxic positivity wasn't used there.
Mm, yeah, just the
Right,
concepts. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, maybe, yeah. So okay, so tell me about this Instagram post. Okay, so tell me what year was that? And tell me,
2018.
read it to me.
Yeah. So
18. Can you read it to me like what it said?
yeah. So in 2018, I put up this post that was toxic positivity in one column, and I listed a lot of phrases like everything happens for a reason, never give
Mhm.
up, things like that. And then in the right hand column, I put like I think validation and hope, and gave people a list of different things that they could say, like, I'm here for you if you want to talk about it, that were a little more validating and less just positivity.
Do you ever re-up that post every now and then? You know,
Yeah, for sure.
recycle that
For sure.
because
For sure. When I made it, it was like the worst graphic. I was my very early days on
uh,
Instagram. So I've updated it since and I put it out when my book was published again.
good, good. I love that. Yeah, you say my clients who live the most fulfilling lives are those who can experience challenging emotions. So you find that's a important route to growth, even in the clinical setting, or
Absolutely.
especially in the clinical setting. Yeah.
Yeah, I find that my clients that and I've worked with a lot of people like this that really just want to feel good all the time or only want to feel
Mm,
positive end up being the ones that struggle the most because when they are confronted with challenges, they don't really know what to do. They become really bogged down by that experience.
you make a lot of really interesting points in this book about positivity. You say positive thinking can give us the illusion of hope and control. In fact, let me quote you. Can I quote you?
Sure.
You say the world can be cruel and random. Unfortunately, we can put out tons of positive energy and still struggle. Strive for a life that honors your values and has meaning. Do the best you can and know that not everything bad that comes your way is because you attracted it. Right? So, is it so? This is kind of related to like the law of attraction kind of idea
Mhm.
that goes around, right? How would you challenge that idea?
The law of attraction, the way that I've come to understand it, is essentially that whatever you put out there will come back to you. And so, what I've found is
Mm,
that that type of thinking can become so victim blaming for some people, and it creates this overemphasis on like the just world bias that if you do good things will happen to you. Or, but we know that bad things happen to good people every day.
mm.
And so I think positive thinking, the law of attraction, it sort of presents this on a silver platter of like, if you just follow this, good things will always come back to you. And we know that to not be true. It's false hope to a certain extent.
Yeah. So it, like you say, it can give us the illusion of hope and control. Yeah. Yeah. And when it's coincidentally working, we can be like, it's working. It's true. But then when it's not true, when it doesn't work, it's like, uh-oh, like how do we explain that?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. You say it's not like you're saying positivity never works. You're saying it just doesn't always work.
Right. That I think there's been an over reliance on it for sure.
I get it. I get it. So do positive people always succeed? Let's just break down all these myths. Let's go down the line. Yeah. Do positive people always succeed?
The research on that really says that no, and that's not even one of, I think we're sold this idea that mindset is the most important part of succeeding in the workplace. And what I found in the research that I did was really that people succeed when they're able to be challenged, when they're able to find problems and solve them. Creativity is heightened when there's quote unquote negativity in the workplace.
Mm.
And so we really need this, healthy dose of like getting knocked down and problem solving to be successful. I've been watching all these shows lately about like WeWork and Theranos, these stories where the leaders are so overly positive that it's like delusional, right? And
Yeah.
I think that's a perfect look into like when positivity goes unchecked and no one is allowed to say like, hey, we have a problem here that we need to
Mm.
fix without getting accused of like dissent when they do that.
Yeah. Well, how can you avoid toxic positivity in the workplace? Like, let's say you do have a boss who's like manically maniacal, egomaniacal, manically egomaniacal. Do you like that? Do you like that
It's
phrase? I just
amazing.
said that for the first time. Yeah. I think that's what you're describing,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. How in the world do you deal with that?
I think that's one of the toughest situations to be in the workplace because if you have a leader that is not listening to you, you can really only control what's within your realm of control, right? So, how can you present and talk about the things that you're concerned about to the people that have power, present them in a way that is meaningful, and also at some point, maybe even saying, like, I don't know if I can work in these types of conditions if it gets to a point where there's too much risk involved in not being heard.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's sometimes easier said than done.
Absolutely.
You can get fired for speaking up at all. But
Mhm.
yeah. Okay, so what if you are a maniacal egomaniac and you want to change? Let's say, yeah, you want to dial that down a little bit. You want to be more negative. You want to be more negative. What can you do?
I really think it's about being more realistic and open to feedback. So, how can you create an environment where people are allowed to voice issues that they have and setting aside time to actually have space for that and knowing that somebody having a problem with what's going on or a concern isn't a direct attack on you. It's them trying to help you make something better, trying to invest in what's going on.
Yeah, I thought that was an interesting chess move you made there. When I said negative, you've reframed it as realistic. And actually, it makes me want to bring up this question because I've criticized positive psychology's use of the distinction between positive and negative emotions, and have argued, well, I'm like, that's putting a label on these class of emotions. You have uncomfortable emotions, you have comfortable emotions, you have exhilarating. It's more about what I want to kind of reframe it to how we feel about the emotions as opposed to objective, labeling. Is that similar to how you think about it as well? Like, what do you think of when I say negative emotions?
I completely agree with you that I think classifying it in that way doesn't make sense. I think
Mm.
uncomfortable emotions or emotions that cause us discomfort makes more sense just because I know as a clinician, I've seen people be uncomfortable with happiness. I've seen people be
Mm.
uncomfortable with peace or calm, that some emotions that we would label maybe quote unquote negative are actually easier for certain people depending on what they've experienced in life.
That's a good point. Also, I'm so used to my anxiety in life that like I did an SSRI a while ago to give it a try, and I was like calm for the first time in my life, and that made me very uncomfortable. I didn't like that feeling of being calm.
Right, right. Exactly.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. And that would be something that people might be like, "Oh, but that's a positive feeling. That should
Yeah,
be
yeah, yeah.
good." And that makes you feel
No,
even weirder.
I threw the SSRIs down the drain. I was like, I want to go back to be feeling alive.
Right.
I want to feel alive.
Right.
I want to feel something.
Want that energy coursing through your veins again.
Yes, I like my nervous energy in the right doses. Yeah, you say you have a math equation here, a very complex math equation, well-being greater than positive thinking. Can you explain that math equation for those who are not so math inclined?
Yes. I think if we have a more comprehensive view of well-being, like where you live, the people that are around you, what you're eating, where you work, all of these pieces that go into who you are, it's a
Mm,
much better way at looking at how we're functioning than just focusing on our thoughts. I think there's this big pressure of like, if you have positive thoughts, you'll have a positive life. And it doesn't
mm.
capture the whole picture, and it leaves people feeling very much like they're responsible for everything in their life.
Yeah, so what do you include under the umbrella of well-being? What are some, can you list some things?
Yeah, I would include like again, where you live, who you're in relationships with, where you work, what you're putting into your body,
Gotcha.
socioeconomic status, all of these types of things.
Okay, good, good. Um, Wonderful. And then when positivity doesn't help, you have some very interesting categories here. Let's talk about illness and disability. I really want to double click on that. Someone who's a big advocate of neurodiversity.
Mhm.
I'm a big advocate of neurodiversity and all the different kind of ways that our minds and bodies can make a huge positive impact on the world. So, how can too much positivity in that domain backfire? Because I see it all the time, but I'd love for you to explain it.
Yeah, all the time. This was like the biggest area that I've seen it in my career. And what we find is that
Mm,
people are often told that they have to have a positive mindset when they are sick with anything. I think people who are living with disabilities, we want them to be inspirational and strong. And, can't people going through cancer are warriors and they're fighting or they lost the battle. And there's this big emphasis on like, if you're going through this really hard thing, you better do it with a smile and be trying really hard, or I kind of don't want to hear about it. And we see that reflected, I think, throughout history, in the media, etc.
yeah, it sucks.
It does.
Because sometimes things just suck.
Exactly.
So that's just it. Sometimes things just suck, and like I want to complain. I want to be around someone who will complain with me
Right.
and not try to reframe it. That actually frustrate me sometimes. Like some people that I talk to, and it's like I'm like complain about something, and they're like, "Well, don't worry, like it's probably for the best." It's like, no, I want you to call that person a motherfucker.
Exactly. Exactly.
That's all I want. That's all I wanted is you to agree with me that that person's a motherfucker.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't know if I get any if this how to be bleeped out what I just said, but you know what I'm saying?
No, I
You know what I'm saying?
completely agree.
Yeah. Romantic relationship struggles. How in that domain, when you have couples and they're like, "We're fine. Our relationship is fine."
Yeah.
No, it ain't. No, it ain't.
So true. And I think also just putting this pressure on people like when they're single, like, oh, you're going to find the one. Don't worry. Someone will love you. It's like people aren't allowed to be upset about anything. It always has to be turned into a positive. Even when people get divorced, we're trying to put a positive spin on that immediately. And maybe that person's going to get there. But I find in the moment, just like you said, they just want to be like, this sucks. Like, it's shitty. Just be with
Mm,
me in this moment.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Okay, what about in the domain of physical appearance? Like, no, you look beautiful. Don't worry, you haven't worked out in 4 years.
Yeah, I find that there's this pressure on, or I should say, this emphasis on talking about how great people look, especially when they're going through something hard. So when we go back to
Mm,
illness, like saying, but you don't even look sick, you look beautiful. And it's like, oh my gosh, it's
yeah.
kind of a compliment, but it's also very dismissive of what I'm going through, or telling someone, like, you look great. You don't even look like you gained weight or you lost weight. It's like, we can compliment people on such more interesting things about them, I think.
Yeah, you're certainly not saying to be like, damn, you look fat. You're not
No,
saying no, no, no.
no.
You're saying just emphasize other aspects of their
Yes,
being
yes,
without lying to them.
yes. Overemphasis on I am not telling people to
Yeah.
say, damn, you look fat.
I'm being clear. I'm being clear so no one
Yes.
misinterprets.
No one
No one
misinterpret me.
misinterprets. Yeah. I got you. I got you, Whitney. And then, and then also, after I'm all, you've noticed I'm a little cheeky. I'm a little
I
cheeky
like
on
it.
on
Keep
the,
going.
because, too many people in our field are so
It's
serious all the
true.
time. Do you notice that?
It's very
And
true.
psychologists can be so serious. And you're
Yes.
like, but the clients just want to laugh. Like all the client really wants is joy,
I
not to be
know.
like over analyzed to the degree where you even feel worse about yourself. Yeah. Okay. So after a traumatic event, let's talk about that. How can that positivity kind of go toxic there?
I think this is another place where we put so much pressure on people to like find meaning and be grateful and be positive. And we know that, yes, there is a lot of value in that. But I think this is all about the timing. When someone's gone through something very difficult, it's not helpful to say to them, well, everything happens for a reason. Just be grateful that this didn't happen, or at least it's not that. That really, in that moment, I think what the person is hearing is like, wow, so you think it's good that I went through this? Or what could possibly be the reason, that my child died or that my spouse got cancer? Like, it's hard to conceptualize that in that moment.
Yeah, I completely agreed with that. A really big domain in which you see this is within the domain of shame. You see a lot of shame disguised as positivity, as you put it in your book. Can you kind of talk about some examples of how that could play out?
The biggest way that I see this playing out is a lot of times when people are using positivity with themselves, it just induces shame. So saying, I shouldn't be feeling this way. I need to be positive. I should be grateful. I have so much. I can't complain about this when they're in a state of distress. To me,
Mhm.
just creates this gap of like, here's how I'm feeling. Here's how I think I should be feeling. And I can't get there. So now I'm going to feel shameful about my emotional experience and beat myself up for it, which we know does not help. And it just
Mm.
ends up isolating people even more.
Yeah, yeah. You say point blank, you say stop shaming yourself. Um, this is actually, if I had to pick like the favorite quote in your whole book, favorite sentence, it might be this one: "Feeling depressed or anxious is hard. Pretending that you're not is much harder." I mean, that is quite profound, because we make our job twice as hard by acting as though we're not, and also we lose potential opportunities for connection with others who are probably feeling similarly, and you'll never know if you don't tell them how you're feeling.
Right. I think that's the biggest threat of toxic positivity is that when we use it against ourselves or other people, it's this feeling of like, I'm the only one that's going through this. No one understands me. And if I talk about this, I'm going to get shut down. So I'm going to miss out on any form of connection in this experience.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So how can you make affirmations work for you? Because do you think all affirmations are bad? Can they be used in a good way? Remember the Stuart Smiley um, skit on Saturday Night Live?
I don't know if I've
You're
seen
awesome. You're great.
it.
God dang it, people like me.
Oh, yes, yes, yes. Okay. I do not think all affirmations are bad in any way. But what I was really surprised by in a lot of the very limited research on affirmations is that they typically don't help for the people that need them, who have depression or low self esteem, because they don't feel true. And so I think
Mm.
affirmations can work when they're backed up by action and they seem realistic. So more like I'm trying to love myself. I'm working on taking care of myself, whatever it is, instead of saying, I'm beautiful. I love myself. I'm perfect.
Good, good. So there's something can be salvaged from these things. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And then a big topic in the field of positive psychology is gratitude. Dun, 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 the G word. The G word. So why can't you force gratitude? Like you mean you really can't. I mean, you can't. These psychology experiments, they are literally forcing the subjects, and then they do pre and post test analysis, and they find statistically significant differences in those they forced versus those they didn't. So are you saying that you challenge the statistics?
I think that these studies are super limited, in my opinion, and only done on certain types of people.
Mm.
And so, what I was finding in a lot of the research on gratitude was that it can't really be generalized to the entire population. And
Do you
well,
mean like white people,
yeah, it's like white women, and there were like 40 of them or
white
something
women,
in the study.
white middle-aged
Yeah,
women? Yeah.
exactly. And so when I'm looking at this, I'm like, okay, well, there's a reason why some people are not feeling these same effects. I've also found anecdotally in my own practice that people hate to be told to use these interventions. Like,
Mm,
make a gratitude list.
yeah.
I think a client's going to punch me in the face if I tell them that because they've heard it from so many therapists.
Yeah. Oh man, I hear you. I hear you. And I've written articles about the importance for existential gratitude, which is just be grateful that you're freaking alive and that you can breathe.
Hmm. Hmm.
Like sometimes in your worst days, there's just like a basic existential form of gratitude that can get you through the day. But I hear you. I totally hear you. So how can you make gratitude work for you then? Again, can we salvage just like we did the affirmations? Can we salvage gratitude? Can we
Yes,
salvage it?
let's save gratitude. So I think when people allow gratitude to come up naturally and organically throughout their day, and a lot more of that existential gratitude that you're speaking about versus like specific things or material items, it can be much more
Mm,
effective. So what I challenge people to do is like throughout your day, can you just organically recognize things of like, oh, it's really nice outside today, or I really liked the meal that I had tonight, or I got to go to bed early. Like just these little moments that you can cultivate a sense of gratitude in your life rather than trying to practice gratitude through exercises that are forced.
good, good, because you don't want a whole bunch of gratitude researchers to be out of business, after listening to your podcast. So we don't want those
Gratitude
poor
is still
gratitude researchers.
valuable. Don't
Yeah,
misinterpret me
yeah,
there. I
yeah, 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 yeah. They might see as a threat, existential threat to
right.
their job. Okay, well, how can I complain more effectively? Because you say complaining can give us an expansive view of our psyche. Whoa!
It's a big
Where
claim.
where where did that one come from, Whitney? Did
Yes,
you just did that come to you like 3 in the morning? Like you woke up right away? Complaining
probably.
gave us an expansive view of our psyche. That's pretty poetic. Poetic. Okay, can you explain to us what that means and how can I complain more effectively?
I think complaining really shows us what's important to us, what we need to work on, where we might need connection in our lives. And so if we try to get rid of it completely, we miss out on all that data. A lot of what people are
Mm,
doing in therapy is a form of complaining, right? And we're taking all that information and making sense of it. So if you want to complain more effectively, it's helpful to know exactly what you want to be complaining about. So, what are the facts? What's the narrative? Then, what do you want to happen? I feel like a lot of people get stuck here of like, do I just want to vent? Do I want there to be change? And then that's going to dictate who can make that happen or what needs to happen for this change to happen. And then you're able to pick the right person or place to go to, which we also end up making the wrong choice here sometimes. And that's when we get stuck in those complaint loops that feel never ending.
oh yeah, for sure. You say the goal is not to eliminate complaining from your life, but instead to make it more effective and adaptive.
Mhm.
Is this related at all to healthy assertiveness versus aggressive? There's like all these different kinds of assertiveness that we learn in the field. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I think you have to know what you're upset about, know what you want to complain about, and then engage in healthy assertiveness, right? To get your needs met. So whether it's that like your food is cold at a restaurant or whatever it is that you need to tell someone about so that they can fix it.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds about right. How can you support people? How can you support others in complaining effectively and in um, also giving polite advice to those who are toxic positivity people? and being like, you may want to dial that down. How can you do that? And in the spirit of support, not being an asshole.
Right. So it depends on the relationship. I always tell people, like, if somebody in the grocery store says to you, like, your baby's crying and they're like, enjoy every minute, you might just want to say, like, okay, thanks, and move on. But if it's which happens to me all the time, but if it's like your mom or someone close to you, it's okay to say, like, I really know that you're trying to help me. I can tell that you're trying to be helpful, but that doesn't really help me, and tell them a way that they can be helpful to you instead, which is really unique for all of us across different situations. But I want people to feel empowered to share what is helpful to them and what isn't, because I think that's the only way people can learn how to be helpful to us.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Very, very good point. You have 4 ingredients that people could include in their communication: curiosity, understanding, validation, and empathy. Do you want to unpack those 4 for me a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. So a lot of what happens when we use toxic positivity is we're just shutting the conversation down. So when you're able to get curious about the person's experience, ask them questions, but in a way to understand them more. So what's the hardest part for you? What are you worried about? Then you're able to get to this place where it's like, okay, how can I have compassion or empathy for this person? How can I show them that I hear them through validation of, like, that sounds hard. Um, I can see why you would be struggling with that. Those things make so much more of an impact than a platitude or a piece of advice.
Good, good. This hopefully helping a lot of people listening to this conversation. So yeah, this is great. Um, you often see discrimination with a smile, right? And I thought that was an interesting phrase as well. And you talk about the ultimate gaslighting. What is the ultimate gaslighting?
So I'll give an example. What I saw happening on social media when we were having a lot of conversations about race during the pandemic was all this toxic positivity that to me sounded like gaslighting. So a person of color would talk about their experience, and then someone would say, gosh, can't we all just get along? I don't see color. Let's all just be nice to each other. And to me, it was this way of saying, like, a very nice, seemingly nice, positive way of saying, please don't talk about that anymore, or I don't really believe your experience. And I think we do this to people in marginalized identities all the time. And it sounds nice, but really, it's really mean. It's terrible.
Well, your point, which we can double click on here, is sometimes discrimination can be disguised in the form of overt niceness, but in a way that demeans um, or denigrates someone's lived experience.
Right. That
Yeah,
ultimately shuts down the conversation.
yeah, yeah. You say removing toxic positivity from conversations about health, illness, and disability requires us to confront a lot of difficult realities. So, in a way, sometimes you think it's used as a band-aid, maybe toxic positivity.
For sure. I think when we're talking about anything related to health or mortality, people get uncomfortable. And so it's almost like I want to make you feel better, but I also really want to make myself feel better by saying everything happens for a reason or it's going to be fine, because I don't want to live in a place where this bad thing is possible.
Mm, yeah, yeah. Health and happiness are not a package deal. Who says they are? Are people saying they are?
I think a lot of people think that if you are happy, if you have positive thoughts, if you think positively, health will be given to you. And that it's sort of like they come together in some ways.
But you don't think that's the case?
I think there's a lot of people that are very positive who struggle with their health. I think there's a lot of people that are extremely negative and live to be 100. Like, I don't know that your mindset always dictates your physical health.
Um, just riffing on the idea of the impact of social media on this, you tend to see that correlation a lot. Looking at others in social media, it can give you a skewed perception of reality, the extent to which they really go together in the real world, because people are just like showing themselves off, right? all the time in ways that are like, look, I'm happy and I'm healthy, like, look at my body, look at my yoga poses, you know. Do you see that as really problematic?
I think that our brains are bombarded with so much of this imagery that even though we know on a logical level, like this is 10% of that person's life, or it doesn't show the whole picture, it's very easy to forget that when you are viewing constant images of people who appear healthy and happy, and that's what they're telling you and showing you.
Mm. Yes, yes. Well, thanks for making that point. Okay, so for our remaining time of this interview today, how can people opt out of the quest for happiness? Yeah.
So I think living a values driven life, which a lot of people talk about this, is really the most important thing. And when you're living in alignment with your values and what's important to you, you're able to accept that you're not always going to feel happy or positive emotions, but you're going to feel like your life has meaning and like you're doing the things that are important to you. I think the best example of this is like when it comes to parenting, that your kids and parenthood might be one of the most important things to you, but it's not always the thing that makes you the happiest, or it can be very frustrating sometimes, but it is often an important value for people.
Yeah, the value-driven life versus the happiness-driven life. The value-driven life is it one that is, would you associate that with more with meaning than happiness?
For sure. More with meaning, with really just knowing what's important to you. And I think what is important changes throughout our lifetime, of course, depending on how old you are and what stage of life you're in, that you can curate those values to like, this is what is important to me right now. And it's okay if that changes later. And it's more about what you believe versus these like happiness scripts that were given from society of like, these are the things you need to do to be happy.
Yeah, yeah. And then there's also psychologists have identified another pathway, the psychologically rich life,
Mm.
which is one that's, I mean, does everything have to be so value driven? That sounds so serious. Like, can't you sometimes just like jump out of an airplane and just have fun? And that's not necessarily even, I'm not talking about hedonia. I'm saying just engaging in rich, complex, interesting experiences that get you out of your comfort zone just for the sake of that.
Right. I would say that could even be a value. Like to
Okay.
say that
Okay.
spontaneity, fun, excitement, like is something that you really, it's an important part of your life and it's something you want to have access to.
I think, I have dark side Sundays, right? And so I like one day of the week where I'd be like, I'll do everything. I don't give a shit if it's part of my value system.
I love that. That's great.
Okay. So one of the worst things about toxic positivity is that when used in the wrong moments, it denies what we're feeling and makes us feel worse. So it is a feedback loop, right? It's part of a cycle. It can spiral. It's interesting. Toxic positivity can spiral downwards.
Yes. Yes.
It's kind of what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely this cycle that we can get stuck in that I think goes back again to that feeling of like, there's something wrong with me because I am a human
Mhm.
being who has feelings and I need to get rid of those feelings. And I think we see a lot of that on social media now.
We really do. We really do. And um, yeah, I mean, kudos to people like you who are pointing this out on social media and giving an alternative perspective. I mean, do you ever just scroll through the timelines and Instagram? I can see your eyes are just rolling.
Yes.
Like, oh,
Yeah, I didn't even know that this world really like existed on Instagram until I got on to market my own practice. And then I was like, wow, there's a lot of really interesting stuff out there.
but I feel like you were really, yeah, they really are. But humans are endlessly fascinating, and I feel like you also just learn a lot about what humans value in general by scrolling through these things. I mean, you know all these like, what do you think of all these inspirational videos? Like one after another with the cheesy music in the background, with the like, like, and then Bobby overcame not having any eyeballs,
Yeah.
and was able to have X-ray vision, and then it's like you're so inspired, right? You're like,
Mhm.
wow, that's so. Do you think that ever goes too far? Those inspirational videos?
I, you know, I think this goes back to like a little bit of what I talk in the book about, like if the person is disabled or there's something, in their life that it kind of makes this pressure of like everything has to come to this positive ending. Like everything has to be inspirational or great in some way, because those are the only stories that we hear on social media. That,
Great point.
we don't hear about the person that didn't have a good ending. They're not getting the video.
What a great point. I think we really should have more videos of people just being like, hey, everyone, look, I'm really not having a good day today. Like, today kind of sucks. And I just wanted to let you all know that. And my heart goes out to all those who are suffering from the same thing. Maybe I'll do that.
That's a good
Whitney, what do you
idea.
think?
That's a good idea.
Oh my
That might
God.
go
As I'm
viral.
hearing myself talk, I'm like, there's viral potential there.
There is. You're onto something.
I'm on with something. You say, and this is you, I'm quoting you, you say, it's okay to just be. Wow, I wish I knew that before today. Would have saved me a lot of pain and suffering in my life.
Well, now I'm noticing this thing on social media that I definitely have participated in and perpetuated, that there's always something to fix, always something to obsess over, that I feel like people now are just becoming obsessed with fixing themselves. And yes, like we all need to do our own work and get to this place, but I want everyone to know that also like you're supposed to live and like enjoy life and not be, just always looking for the next trauma or attachment style or this, that like it can be just a lot.
Yeah, of a lot. Sometimes it's good to just dial it all down and just exist.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally hear you. We'd be remiss not to mention Gabrielle Oettingen's research, because sometimes a little positive fantasy does help.
Yes.
Don't tell me to like eradicate all positive fantasies from my head, please, because also my advisor in grad school, Jerome L. Singer, studied positive constructive daydreaming. So in what ways can that be helpful?
That type of like positive fantasy can help you get from like moment to moment. So they've shown like people that are in wartime or in prison or things like that, fantasizing about what's next, what could be, can really help you weather the storm of that moment of something very difficult.
So talk more about Gabrielle Oettingen's research. She found that sometimes, though, fantasies can deplete you from wanting to actually make it a reality, right, in the real world. So it could be a double-edged sword.
Well, they talk about like how a lot of these positive fantasies don't allow you to look out for obstacles or to create a plan, right? You're just focusing on like how great it's going to be when all of this happens. And so it's like that, the whoop technique that Dr. Oettinger talks about is really getting in touch with, what is your wish? What do you want the outcome to be? What problems could come up? What opportunities do you have? And getting a full picture of like the attack instead of just having this positive fantasy about it.
Yeah. So you're in no way advocating today that we need to eradicate positivity from our language and our dreams and desires. You're not like Satan.
No, I'm sure some real positive people maybe have accused me of that from time to time. But I think positivity has a time, a place, a purpose. I just think we've become so obsessed with it to a degree that it's starting to hurt us more than help us.
I hear you. I'm going to end with some quotes from you. Not all positivity, happiness, or good vibes are bad. Remember to look out for the timing, audience, and topic that you're discussing. This is the best way to identify if something is toxic positivity. That's basically what you just said. And then I want to end with this note. When we opt out of the predetermined path toward happiness, we gain access to so much more. You'll get to feel all of it: joy and pain, comfort and discomfort, growth and stagnation. You'll be able to ride the waves of life and know that there isn't this final happiness destination. This is it. This is what we've got. And all the feelings, ups and downs, changes, and chaos certainly make the ride much more interesting. Well, thank you so much for being on my podcast today and making my life more interesting today by having this chat.
Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Psychology Podcast. If you'd like to react in some way to something you heard, I encourage you to join in the discussion at thepsychologypodcast.com or on our YouTube page, The Psychology Podcast. We also put up some videos of some episodes on our YouTube page as well, so you'll want to check that out. Thanks for being such a great supporter of the show, and tune in next time for more on the mind, brain, behavior, and creativity.